This video is sponsored by Game Toppers. Turn your own kitchen or dining room table into a premium portable game solution at a fraction of the cost. Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 778. Today we're going to talk about a little card game called American Bookshop. Now this is published by Twin Lion Games. Designer, I'm going to screw the name up, Taiki Shinzawa. And this is a game that's a couple of years old and completely sold out. So I feel bad about doing a review, but this is a game that could be played with a standard deck of 52 playing cards, and I'll show you exactly how to do that. It's very, very simple. There's not really any special tricks. I will have a link to the Board Game Geek page where there are rules that you can download and print out that will fit like card size in a little card deck. So I would say, kind of spoiler, because maybe it's spoiled a little bit because of the fact that I'm even doing this review, but I think it's totally worth it to go and just print those out. It's very, very simple. So let me show you how to play the game, and I'll come back and tell you why I enjoy it. Okay, here we've got the game, and this is a nice, it looks kind of like a book, right? It's got the little magnetic seal there, which is pretty cool. And so if you have a regular deck of 52 cards, you don't need the jokers, so you can take those out. And then let's go ahead and take the components out of here. You got the little rule pamphlet there, and then we have the cards. So a couple of things to note about kind of the game's setup. One thing that you won't have in your standard deck of 52 cards are these cards here. And you can see these are based on the player count. So in a 3-player game, the target number for the tricks for each of the hands that you're going to be playing is going to vary based on the number. But like I said in the intro, you can go print out the little rules sheet to put into your little deck of cards, and that'll have that number written on there. So 14 for a 3-player game, 16 for a 4-player game, and then 17 for a 5-player game. It's a 3 to 5-player game. So you'll need some indication of what that number is. Now in a 3-player game, I've already done this here for as an example, you're going to pull out one of the suits. Okay, so you can see these are not your typical suits. These are based on some famous novels, because it's about kind of very loosely, the theme doesn't matter, but kind of famous novels. So I pulled out here the pink suit. So in the 3-player game, you pull out one of the suits. So for example, in the regular deck, you could pull out the clubs if you're playing a 3-player. If you're playing 4 and 5, leave everything in the game. The other thing to note is the values don't 100% match up, but they mostly do. So here you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, okay? And a couple of zeros. So what these map to is, of course, the ace would be the 1, and the other numbers will be what they are. The 11 will be the jack. So if we were playing that as the hearts, the 11 is the jack. Now there's no zeros, but if you are using the standard deck of cards, the kings and queens in this case will count as 0. And this is all of the modification that you need to do. Basically, jacks are 11, which is typical in a lot of card games, and the kings and queens are zeros. That's really the only modification. And then you can go ahead and play with your regular deck of playing cards. So let's get these out of here. We'll pretend we're playing a 3-player game. So you just put that in the middle of the table. And then you'll shuffle up whatever deck you've got here. We'll just take a look at some of the cards here in the various different colors and things. And you're just going to deal out all of the cards in the deck to all the players, no matter player count. So everybody will have a hand, a giant hand of cards with a bunch of numbers and colors. So we'll just put some examples out here. And what you're trying to do is, win tricks. Now there's no bidding or knocking or anything like that in this particular game. You'll have a start player randomly determined to start the game. And then you're going to basically play a number of hands equal to the number of players. So each player is like effectively the dealer, but if you're playing a 3-player game, you play 3 hands. Or you could play 6 hands if you wanted to make it kind of a long game. And then you'll total up the points at the end of the determined length of hands. So if you're the start player, maybe you play this green 6. Okay, so that starts off, and we're pretending we're doing a 3-player game. Now the next player, if they have a green, they have to follow with that green. If they don't have a green, they can play any card that they want. But let's pretend in this case we have a green for the next player here, Billy. So now we've got a total of 8 here. And this is where this card comes into play. So let's say the next player, for some reason, they play the 1, okay? So this threshold has not been triggered. We haven't hit 14 as a total. There's only 6, 8, 9 value out here. So this will act just like kind of a normal trick in an everyday trick-taking game. The highest value of the lead suit. We'll then collect these. In this case, I would collect all 3 of these. And when you collect cards, you will put them face up in front of you in columns of the different colors. So if later on I collected some blue cards and maybe I got a brown card in that trick, I'll put these here. So you're tracking, and we'll explain how this gets scored at the end of the game, but you're tracking how many each player has that they've collected by winning tricks of each of the different colors. And we'll explain how that scoring works. It's very simple, but it's also very cool. Now let's do another kind of example here. Let's say I played a 6 green, and then the next player doesn't have any green, so they go ahead and play a 7 blue. So that equals 13. Okay, so we're fine. Now the next player that comes in can play a card, and let's say they had, for some reason, let's say it had a 3 here. So in this case, you'd say, okay, well, still the lead suit would win that, but no, because the player that equaled or went above that number is going to stop the trick at that instant, and then they're going to be the winner of the trick, whoever basically made it hit that threshold or go above it. So because now we're at 13, this puts us at 16, then this player would then collect those cards. Now, a different type of scenario here, let's do this. So if I played the 6 of green, and then the next player played an 8, bam, they hit 14, and then that will trigger the end of the trick. So it will short circuit the trick from getting all the way around and then resolving it based on the highest of the lead color. Now here's another example, just so we're clear. Let's say I played another card of that color. So if I hit that, this is 15 in this case. Even though it's the same color, still short circuits the trick and you take it. So what's going to happen if we just keep playing that around and around, and the winner of the trick will then lead the next hand, and then we'll just keep going from there until one player runs out of cards. Now you can see, because this is getting short circuited here from these 2 players, this third player in this case didn't get to play a card. And it can happen, at the end of the game, or end of the round, where one player's run out of cards and somebody still has cards left in their hand. And what happens then is anybody who has cards left in their hand will simultaneously put cards face down. They don't have to do all the cards. They could do 1 card or 3 cards or no cards. And then they will then add them to the stacks that they have in front of them. And then at this point is when you're going to total up the points. And so you're then going to look at who has the most of the various different colors. And let's just use this as an example here. So we're going to look at green. And so let's pretend I have the most green. So I'm going to get 1 point for each green that I have. So now I've got 4 points. But I don't have the most blue and I don't have the most brown. These are going to be worth -1 point. So my total at the end of this round is only 1 point, because I got +4 and -3 there. Now if you were tied, let's say another player, let's say I had 3 blue or something, and another player had 3 blue, we were tied for the most. Neither of us in that case has the most, because there's nobody has the most, we're tied. So in that case, again, these will score negative in that case. So in this case, if that was the case, my actually total for that round would be 0 points. So you then shuffle everything back up, you go and play the cards, like I said, short circuiting tricks if somebody hits, again, the target number, which again will vary based on the player count. And then you just play a certain number of hands, however you feel like, really, and whoever has the most points will be the winner. Okay, so that is American Bookshop. I'll just go into my 3 pillars of review. First thing we'll talk about is player count. Played it 3, 4, and 5 players. I think my favorite player count is actually 3, but I really like it at 4, and I still like it at 5. It's just kind of, it's tough because there's just more stuff kind of going on and more stuff to keep track of. So it's a little bit tighter of an experience at that lower player count. And it's just a little easier to count cards, to be frank. So I really like it though. I really like it at 5. I have no problem playing it at 5. But if you force me to pick player count, probably 3 and then 4 and then 5. Playtime, it kind of depends. We've played this for hours, just doing multiple hands and starting over and, starting the points at 0. I would recommend, I think you can play it, the rules say basically play a number of hands equal to the number of players. That seems good, and then you just reset to 0. Because like with trick-taking games, somebody could get out to a big lead that's just not surmountable effectively. But kind of seasoned to taste, right? But we've had so much fun with it, and we've kind of just fallen into doing that, where it's like, 3 hands, reset to 0, 3 more hands, reset to 0, and so on. And that seems to work. So you can gauge your player time, based on that. You could play it for 5 hours, you could play it for like half an hour. Now, what is this game like as far as the other pillar goes? It's like any trick-taking game, but man, this is one of my favorites that I've played in a long, long time. It's very simple. Like you see, you could play it with a deck of 52 cards. You don't need any real special thing other than to know what that kind of target number is, which you can just print out, or you can go to BGG and print that rules out, or just write it down, or just know it. I think after a while you just end up kind of knowing it. And that's it. And there's no it's almost like there's no real twist, but there is a twist, right? Because you have the ability to kind of interrupt and short circuit that trick, which then gives you some sort of say at the end of the game, which is interesting. If you get sort of short circuited out of playing some cards, that can help you dictate. So I don't know, there's some strategy around that. Oftentimes though, you don't really have too much agency with those cards that you get left over. It's a little bit of an afterthought, but not really in like a negative way, because there's so much else that kind of comes into play along with that. And a lot of times it's more about, okay, I want to hold these cards back because they're actually going to hurt me. If I'm forced to play these at some point, it's actually going to end up hurting me because I'm going to end up collecting cards I don't want. Because remember, when you score, you only get positive points if you have the most of that suit, of that color. Any other cards that you have, they're not benign, they're actually negative. You don't want those cards. And so holding those cards is more about that than actually having some cards to then make the difference in the play. Although I've seen that happen, where you can say, oh, this is going to give me that 1 green, I'm tied with Billy, and then I'm going to get the points, and Billy's just going to eat it. He's going to get -4 points, and now I'm going to add the extra card and get +5 because I broke the tie. So I've seen it happen, but it's relatively rare. But the part of the game that I absolutely love is that short circuit thing, and trying to pivot based on how the cards are starting to come out, from getting some cards and getting a good run of a certain color to get in the positive and kind of lock that in. But then you're playing defense, you're like fencing with, you don't want all of these other cards, because that's just going to bring that down. You'd be like, oh, I've got 5 or 6 greens, midway through the hand, and then you just start collecting these other cards. You're like, well, now I have 0 points or negative points, for their hand. So that's really the best part of that game, is when that lever shifts over and kind of passes that midpoint, and then you're really playing defense. And you have to really consider that. And it's a very tricky thing to try to sort of digest and get into. It took me, several hands. 4 or 5 hands of this thing to really be like, oh, okay. Because you really have to play defensively. That is the main key. Because if you eke out, a couple of points, that's great. But then if you can start laying little bombs for people as you get rid of those cards, which could blow back in your face, of course, but you try to set up little traps for people to just feed them cards, and it's just hurting them. They'll be like, oh, I collected 2 green cards, but I got a blue card, so I'm only netting 1 point out of that whole hand. And so playing around in that space is just really, really cool, and it's really, really different. And it's such a simple game, and I've really just had an absolute blast with this. I was actually all ready to do a review and just do the 52 cards of the normal deck of cards, but I got lucky. I think I found the last one on Board Game Geek, on the Geek Market, from another user, and I was like, oh, gotta get it, because I love this game. And so unfortunately you can't find it. If you go look, it's been a few weeks now since I got this official copy, but so there might be 1 or 2 floating around there, but there's not very many. But in my opinion, don't worry about it. I was fully prepared, and actually a buddy of mine sent the link. He's like, hey, there's one up, and I was like, oh crap, I would have got it, right away. But I was fully ready to say, I'll just do a video, with the 52 cards. You don't need the official game, and I was happy playing with the 52 card deck. It's cool. I love that you can do that. So maybe one day, they'll like reprint it or something, and you can just have the nice little box and the, the little threshold cards and that stuff. But you don't need it. And I love that you can just play this with a deck of cards. So I mean, if you're at like somebody's house one day, you're like, hey, let me show you a cool game. You got a deck of cards lying around, and you just have to know what those numbers are. I mean, you don't even need to print the rules out. The rules are so simple. You just need to know what those numbers are, and then you're ready to go. So I recommend this up and down the board. I can't recommend it enough. I've played it with folks that don't really play trick-taking games a whole lot, but it's so simple that they can get into it. And it's a little bit baffling in terms of like, because you get that blowback of like, you're getting all these cards, you're like, I don't want these, you're just getting negative points. So it's a little bit of like a strategic tactical hurdle, but the mechanics of it are simple. It's very intuitive and everybody understands what's going on. It just becomes then the puzzle of trying to figure out how to play it well. And I think even, across the board, everybody struggles with that because it's just very non-intuitive in terms of, the skill, but the actual mechanics is very intuitive. And everybody seems to pick that up right away. First hand or two, they kind of go, oh, okay, I gotta get it. And then now you're trying to move into gamer mode where you're trying to do really well. So can't recommend it enough. I mean, go and look for it. Don't bother, in my opinion. Look for 10 minutes and then you won't find it. But then just go grab your deck of cards and break it out next time. And I mean, I highly recommend it. It's really, really fun. So anyway, that's American Bookshop. Thank you.